Joining me now from Cairo is Mostafa Ragab. He is the founder of the Egyptian Association in the UK. And from Berlin, we have Magdi. He is a researcher with Human Rights Watch for the Middle East and North Africa. Thanks both so much for joining us. Let me begin in Berlin. Amr, where does Egypt's human rights record stand today?
Thank you for your time. I think we are still seeing deterioration of the human rights situation in Egypt over the past 5 years. The current government, backed by the military, has been presiding over actually one of the worst human rights crises in Egypt's recent history. When it comes to any aspect of civil or political or even social rights. Public sphere is almost completely shut down. That's not just the opposition allegation or human rights organization observation, but even by close journalists who are close to President Sisi, like Ahmed Hussein or Abdullah Sinawi. They are all saying the same. There is no political life. We have seen no competition, no environment for fair and free competition in the presidential elections. We are seeing thousands of people, civilians are being referred to military persecution, and also a clear break from Egypt's history when it comes to the number of death sentences and also executions. Just from last December, we have at least 28 people executed, mostly before military courts.
Okay, Mostafa, do you concede that Egypt not only has a very poor record on human rights, but it also continues to deteriorate as we speak?
Goodness gracious, well, your guest has done his best to paint Egypt with a very, very dark picture. Obviously, Egypt is going through a very, very difficult time. And if we're going to talk about human rights, this card is always being used to put pressure on Egypt. What is happening in Egypt now during that time when people are just trying to make the government collapse and everybody's doing his best to bring Egypt down? Egypt is struggling now to keep going. And within that, I understand that there will be some victims, but not with the picture that your guests have painted it. Human rights are all over the world. I mean, in America and the UK, everywhere, when people talk about human rights, I wonder what they tell me, what they're talking about. People here have not been put to military courts. People here are exercising their rights very well. I'm in a visit to Egypt right now, and I'm walking around the streets. People are freely. People on social media are saying a lot of things that they should never say, and they should be really sentenced for what they do on social media against the government. But things are fine. Things are fine, not any less than the UK where I live. I'm visiting Egypt now, and I see everybody here exercising his rights. Everybody's maybe doing more than his rights. But if people who run away from Egypt, trying to paint Egypt with this very dark picture, I say, forget it, because the people in Egypt are enjoying their life, and the government are doing a great job and doing their best. And for that, forget about your human rights. And those human rights organizations been funded by other people to do this to Egypt, painted with this picture, forget it. The people in Egypt are enjoying themselves.
Okay. Amr, let me ask you, I mean, we were talking about primarily why the U.S. decided to restore its aid to Egypt. Perhaps the United States does agree with Mostafa Ragab there. And is Human Rights Watch or other aid organizations painting an unfairly negative picture of Egypt?
It's so funny to hear from the government and its supporters all the time these funny accusations about the fund and so on. They never actually go spend 5 minutes on the websites of Human Rights Watch or Amnesty or other credible organizations around the world to see our work in other parts of the world, including the United States, and how we criticize the police apparatus there, how we covered Myanmar and the cleansing of Rohingya minority, and our work on the Palestinians and so on. it's just so funny accusations, especially when we are talking about the U.S. support to Egypt. Egypt is the second biggest recipient of U.S. aid in the whole world after Israel and have received over $80 billion over 30 years. So is it just okay for the government to receive aid, but it's forbidden and bad thing when non-government organizations receive aid from donors who want to see the world improve and want to preserve human dignity? I didn't see any like substantiated claims from our guest. He's talking about walking in the street and seeing people happy, but I think we have at least 60,000 people on, that have been thrown in jail or persecuted on political backgrounds in the last 4 years. And we have also seen that Egypt has become the second top worst jailer of the journalists in the whole world, and this is also a clear break from Egypt history. Even under dictator Mubarak, even under President Mubarak, the the crackdown on rights was not that bad. We always had a margin for freedom of expression. We always had a margin for peaceful mobilizations in the street. Tell me what was the last. Let your guest tell me when was the last anti-government protest that was not cracked down and people taken to jail or killed because they protested against the government. He's actually expressing his thoughts very clearly now. He's saying that people on social media should be taken to jail because they criticize the government. He's exactly expressing what's happening.
Okay, Mostafa, I will get to you in 1 second, but first I need to ask Amr very quickly. Why do you think then the United States did this? What does the United States actually get out of acknowledging that Egypt has improved and that they can restore aid?
Yeah. Actually, the United States didn't say that human rights in Egypt has improved. It used very vague and diplomatically worded diplomatically worded statement saying that Egypt has met some of the U.S. concerns. But these concerns are most probably regarding Egypt's relation with North Korea, not regarding human rights. And this is very, very damaging to the cause of human rights, to the sufferings of human rights activists and people who want to see Egypt improve. Because when the U.S. Side in the beginning and last year when they withheld the aid, that they withheld it both for human rights and political concerns, and now they release the aid without any improvement of human rights, but just for maybe some improvement regarding the Egypt-North Korea relationships. This is very harming to the credibility of the U.S. when it comes to commitment to protect human rights. And it's just very self-damaging. It's like shooting themselves in the foot.
Okay, Mostafa, go ahead.
Just let me correct what he is saying there. The United States administration have committed themselves to compensate Egypt for the losses they've had in '79 when they made the peace agreement. So this is a commitment the American administration have made. When they reduce this commitment, they've actually breaking the agreement. It's a signed agreement. They have to honor the agreement they did. So when they say they watching the human rights in Egypt, please go and watch the human rights in Palestine. Please go and watch the human rights in Syria. Please go and watch these disaster areas. And instead of you Egyptian go abroad and then start to get you some funds to build some human rights organization and have you living. And of course, the more you criticize Egypt and the more you speak against Egypt, the more you get your funds. We understand all this business. Where is the human right in Iraq? Where is the human right in Palestine? For God's sake. And you're talking about Egypt. People in Egypt are enjoying the rights. When you say about social media, I want them to go to prison. No, people go over the top and insult and swear at officials, and that should not be allowed. That's not freedom of speech. But freedom of speech should stop with the word respect. I do not agree with anybody who go and say you should be free to do what the hell you like. No, there is a limit.
Mostafa, quickly let me ask you though.
So people,
you're saying this actually, the United States justification for restoring this aid goes back to agreements made decades ago. You can argue that, but usually no country does something for nothing. And I'm going to raise the point of what Egypt has done about the issues with North Korea. Doing some dealings in weapons, suspected weapons dealings out of...
You are actually, excuse me, you're actually raising a very, very important point. Egypt is suffering this with not just the United States, with some other countries. And that proved to me that Egypt is doing the right job. So when the American asked the Egyptian government to do something that is not for the benefit of Egypt, and they don't do it, then they play with these human rights cards. And when Egypt do it because it is for our sake, then they are very friendly and they do whatever we want. This is politics. This is dirty politics, clearly.
So
but when we say it's human rights, they know, looking at our human rights records, our human rights records are just average. And through this sensitive time that Egypt is going through, to control the streets, to have peace, to have this stability in the streets, then we have to be very harsh. We have to be very tough.
But did al-Sisi force North Korea, yes or no, to cut the number of diplomats at the North Korean embassy in Cairo, as media had been reporting, in order to appease the United States and get that funding back?
Obviously, we have no proof whatsoever for that. But the Americans are always asking for things, and Egypt will do it if it's for our benefit. Egypt will not do it if it's not for our benefit. And as I said, this is happening even with some friendly countries. But this is the way it goes, I'm afraid. This is politics for you.
Okay.
Can you imagine that Egypt is telling the Korean government what to do? I don't think so.
Okay, they can tell the Korean government what to do on their own territory. But I need to get to one last kind of wrap-up question then with you, Amr Magdi. Having the U.S. restore this aid, what kind of precedent does it set for you at Human Rights Watch?
Well, it's not a precedent, actually, because over the last decades, even during times of Mubarak and also during the last 7 years after the revolution in Egypt, we have seen different U.S. administrations using what is called national security waiver, which means that the U.S. can still go ahead and send aid and military equipments to countries like Egypt, where there are severe and grave human rights abuses, if this is in the interest of the United States. And this also answers accusations that our guest is throwing here and there to credible human rights organizations that are working to improve human rights. So he has no doubts about the intentions of the U.S.
What did you improve? Can you tell me what did you improve?
Requirements for supply.
Could you tell me what did you manage to improve?
What do you mean?
What did you manage to improve in human rights? People are slaughtered every day in Palestine. Have you managed to improve anything? Can you talk to Israel?
Sir,
can any human rights organization talk to Israel? They will tell you to go to hell. Yeah, no way.
Okay.
Yes,
no
we have a big battle right
friend,
now
I know
in the
this fund
Israelis
coming back
because they want to throw out our researcher from the country.
Your fund, and you will have all
we
the reasons
many
to ask people to fund you more. You are earning your living, my friend. You are earning your living. I'm not earning my living. I'm a volunteer for my country. You run away from your country to build a human rights organization. That's all.
I'm going to have to interrupt you there.
Thank you.
And very unfortunately, we're out of time for this segment of the Newsmakers. There's so much more to discuss, I know, but I'd like to thank you both so much for joining us.